My question is to all three mayors. I would like to ask them what they think about the Sheep Paddocks Trail, and if they support it, if I can get a letter of support from the communities.
I think we already sent you one, but if we haven't, we will. The Sheep Paddocks Trail is in the Metro Vancouver Park system. It's part of a trail network in Colony Farm. It's in Coquitlam. And years ago, erosion took out the trail, and quite frankly, it frustrates me that trail still isn't available, because we used to cycle it all the time, and we'd love to get back to cycling. I know there's Councillor Robinson in the audience that is adamant that this needs to happen. The Parks Committee at Metro Vancouver, I think, is still struggling with how to get that happening. But I'm glad to hear from you. The Quick-Wetland Band, of course, has a keen interest in that, and I thank you very much for raising the question.
I think we also wrote a letter of support, and if we didn't, I'm sure that we will. And we do have the benefit of having Councillor Robinson and Councillor Penner from Port Coquitlam both on the Parks Committee at Metro Vancouver. That was a great appointment of whoever did that, and allows for that issue to stay forefront at that committee, because that's really where that decision is going to be made.
And I don't know if you need the Port Moody opinion on. Obviously, I'm down at Colony Farm quite often, and I use the trails down there. But it's not in our community. Although we're supportive of what Metro Vancouver is trying to do in the regional park system in general. I don't believe we've received anything asking for our support on it, but I'm pretty sure we would if we had it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Who's next?
Since business is so important in the Tri-City areas, are you going to allow business owners that don't necessarily live in the Tri-City areas to vote on civic issues?
It's not up to us. It's up to the provincial government, and they went through it, and they said, no, if you own land, you can vote, but if you don't own the land, you can't vote, and it's not a civic decision. It's a provincial government. Joe, Diane, Doug, Mike?
And in fact, it's a little bit, if you own the land as a business, you can't vote still. I mean, it has to be you individually that owns the land, that you essentially lease out to a proprietorship or something like that. It's convoluted. It's completely unfair in that businesses pay taxes in the community and don't get a chance to vote in that community. I think it's unfair. I know other members of local governments think it's unfair and wish it were otherwise, but it is a provincial decision that was made years ago, and we live by it. I absolutely support getting the business the chance to vote in local elections. There have been several proposals made that actually set out how it would work, and I think several of them are very viable and very easy to implement, but I don't think we're going to get there until obviously the provincial government takes it on as an issue.
Without rehashing, Jim, personally I support it as well.
I'm not sure. I don't think I do. It's probably suicide to say it in this room, but I'm not sure. We looked at, UBCM did research on it when they went through 3 years ago. They went through the provincial government in collaboration, and actually Doug Horn, you were on that committee, looked at it, and when they looked at the voter turnout for provincial or for civic elections in other jurisdictions that allowed business vote, it was extremely low. There wasn't a lot of engagement at it, so I'm open-minded to it, but I haven't been convinced that it's frankly a good idea yet.
A question about Riverview. There seems to be a great degree of consensus that nobody in the three communities wants to see it redeveloped for residential, for example, or turned over for private use. But there doesn't seem to be any tremendous amount of leadership coming from any of the three cities to actually promote some kind of redevelopment plan. And the concern is it's going to be decided by default from people outside the community. So I'm wondering what thoughts you have. And I guess, Richard, maybe if you want to pick up on this because it's directly in your community, what kind of leadership we can expect from the current council to really get things going on Riverview?
About a decade ago, City Council in Coquitlam initiated a process to help define what the site could become. And that plan still exists. It was presented to government back then. I think the way in which Woodlands, quite frankly, was developed, I think government left a whole bunch on the table and made a mess of it. I opposed in the 90s when the provincial government was talking about selling it. I know they decided it wasn't a good idea. And that right now we're in a process that the provincial government is currently doing a heritage assessment of Riverview Hospital. I was there on the weekend again talking to reporters about how that might come about. There are some tremendous heritage buildings, a tremendous arboretum, and it's really the only 250-acre parcel in urban Lower Mainland owned by the provincial government, that is left intact. And I want it to be, and our council, not just me, I'm not going to speak for our council wants it to remain intact in government hands, in public hands, used for public purposes, be it a university, college, campuses, healthcare. Certainly, we have such a tremendous history in Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam of embracing mental health service delivery. 100 years next year. And yet this year that Riverview Hospital, the institution itself, is closing. There still will be delivery of mental health services in 3 new buildings, at least on Riverview Hospital's site. But we need some decisions made going forward as to how Riverview Hospital will be dealt with, because it's an incredible piece of land. I cycle it all the time. I spend time down there because it really has a lot to offer, and yet it was just added to the 10 most endangered heritage sites list because the heritage values on that site are being destroyed by the weather. They're being destroyed by essentially inaction, and we need action on the site. We need to find consensus among governments as to what's going to happen there. And I'll tell you, it's not going to be a wholesale residential development like we saw in other sites like it. It can't be.
Regarding the Riverview Hospital, what steps the city has taken, I'm asking Richard, to come with the idea for the use of the Riverview Hospital? For example, I know UBC wants to have a branch in Tri-City because it's not fair to students in Tri-City to go all the way to UBC. So have you talked to UBC? Have you done anything? Or, I mean, I don't mean you, I mean.
Actually, I and council and staff have talked to UBC, Kwantlen College, Douglas College, SFU. We've gone around trying to market the site, even though it's not our land, it's the provincial government's land. We've tried that because we really need to find that end use that's compatible with a campus that currently exists, compatible with the retention of several of the heritage buildings and the heritage tree collection, which is without compare. We've done that. There's more that can be done, and we're stepping up again, trying to make sure that the provincial government, the federal government understand the values that exist on that site. It's an incredible site, and if any of you haven't been there recently, drive down today, drive tomorrow, drive this weekend, and get out of your cars and walk through the trees around West Lawn, Center Lawn, and East Lawn. Take a look at what has happened to West Lawn, which is the oldest of the really big buildings, the red brick buildings. There's 3 red brick buildings, East, West, and Center. The one on the west is failing. I mean, the roof tiles are sliding off because it just hasn't been, it closed 20 years ago and it's just hasn't been maintained. It actually closed before that. And so how do you protect the remaining buildings that can be protected, find the ones that need to be preserved long-term, preserve the arboretum and the park-like setting, and ultimately find a use for the rest of the site that's in public hands so that we can sustainably preserve that site. It costs more than $1 million a year to cut the lawn. So, I mean, we've got to find a solution here.
I'd just like to hear from the 3 mayors on their opinion of the TransLink governance model and what their solution would be for that.
I think the TransLink governance model right now, in my opinion, is broken. I'm not just saying that the way that we had it before was perfect, but the pendulum swung so far to the other side that there's no, frankly, accountability at the TransLink governance model. We have a private board of directors that has a mayor's council that gets to do 2 things. We approve who's on the board, kinda, in the sense that if we don't, the provincial government will just appoint them. And we only vote on supplementary budgets. Supplementary budgets are budgets that when they need new funding, that's what we get to vote on. We don't get to vote on operations. We don't get to vote on the current budget. We don't get to vote on who's hired, not who's hired, but, well, at the executive level, none of that stuff. So there's really, in my opinion, a lack of accountability there. I'm not sure what the right model is. I know that the private sector board has done some really good things in leaning some of the operations, as much as we hear in the media that it's not. They've done some excellent operational issues there. But I think we need to take it to the, maybe flip it around, I'm not sure. But the bottom line is you can play around with the governance as much as you want. If there's not a sustainable funding source for TransLink, we're going to have the same system that we have now. And we have 30% pass-ups on the bus. So the system is beyond capacity. We need to figure out how we get new money into the system. You know, finally we're getting the Evergreen line, which is great, but we need more buses. We need more frequency of buses because people obviously are wanting the service, but we're passing them by. And until we get to that point, and just the last point on the governance model being broken, you know, the Mayor's Council did go beyond those 2 jobs and looked for new funding sources, which is never a popular thing to do, especially as a politician, to say, hey, here's how I think we should get more money from you. But we went through this long process to look at new funding sources. We came up with 4 that we thought were worthy of another level of investigation and go out to the community. We checked in, because we don't have the authority to do it. The provincial government has to change legislation. So we went to the provincial government and said, hey, here's the 4 that we think we should move forward with. And they took 2 off the table with no analysis and just said, well, you guys can do more work on these other ones. So the relationship there also isn't as strong as it could be. And a lot of it just comes down to funding.
And that's why I wanted Greg to go first, because he likes to talk. But I think, no, I think Richard's got a slightly
I didn't hear the bell.
Richard's got a slightly different, Richard's got a slightly different opinion probably than I seem to be closer to Greg. I think the frustration there, and you know, Joe fought this battle for many years before me, and what I'm seeing there as coming in, you know, partway through this is, you know, we had different commitments, and the Mayor's Council stepped up and took on responsibility because they really want what's the best thing for the people in the region. They volunteered, they stuck their neck out, as Greg says. They went out to the public and they said, we're going to tax you. We're going to hit you on here, we're going to hit you on there, we're going to put in a vehicle levy, and we're going to put the gas tax up because we think, you know, this is a good plan for the region. And then, in my opinion, completely aired out on the back end when the provincial government came and said, no, you know what, well, I know we said that we would have that conversation with you, but we were just kind of kidding. We're not going to let you do this, we're not going to let you do that. So what do you have left? Property tax, which was not necessarily my opinion, but the overwhelming majority of the Mayor's Council says we don't want to keep funding TransLink through property tax. We want to look at alternatives. Personally, I think that rapid transit infrastructure in particular, if it's funded through some form of property taxation, beneficial area taxation, something like that, isn't necessarily incorrect, because you're identifying those people don't have cars, they're not buying gas, but they are benefiting hugely from the transportation grid that you're building. So you need to have them contributing somehow. Perfect model, in my opinion, after looking at this now and seeing what's going on, is that we pull the planning back to Metro Vancouver, where we have the say. We pull the revenue back to Metro Vancouver, which is our gas tax money. We put the transit planning into the regional planning model, and then we send our plan with our money over to TransLink. We say, you know what, you guys can play around with the rest of the stuff. We're basically doing to them what they've been doing to us. You guys can play around with the stuff over there that you want to, but we're going to make this happen. I think what they do operationally that Greg talks about, they make a huge mistake. They sit in a room, they come up with a plan, and then they come out to you and they say, and here's your 3 choices for how you'd pay for it. They forgot to include you in the planning. So people know that we need more transit, but the people south of the Fraser say, what about us? The people at UBC say, what about us? People in the Tri-Cities say, we've waited 20 years. So they're not in on the planning, but they're being asked to jump in and pay for it. And when it's not your plan, you're not always that anxious to jump out and pay for it. But if we're all in this together, and I think we have a great model at Metro Vancouver, and we have a pretty good chair over at Metro Vancouver now and good committees, and I think we could put that together and have it work very smoothly and integrate it with the regional planning so that a city like Port Moody doesn't double our population in anticipation of a SkyTrain line coming through here in the year 2000, and then have it pulled out, and then have to start the whole process over of negotiating, saying, well, maybe if you guys up your density a little bit, you can get transit. It's like, we already did that. We were in on this plan from the ground floor, and it kept falling apart and falling apart. You know, Joe, like I say, Joe fought that battle for years and previous councils, so I appreciate where they're coming from. But I think we have a good model that would work at Metro, and they should just move it over. He doesn't agree.
I agree.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, ultimately, we all agree. The TransLink model isn't working right now. We all agree that there are too many cars on the road. Actually, most people don't agree that there's too many cars on the road. They think there's too many other cars on the road. Particularly the car right in front of them, and they want to get some cars off the road. Unfortunately, the model goes like this. We could spend as a council more money on pavement, and we wouldn't have to go to the voters and do anything. We would just pave more roads. But if we wanted to spend more on a bus, we have to find another source of revenue because the revenues are all tapped out. And it's all limited by provincial legislation and by the abilities of local government to do these things. And it should be exactly the reverse. We should be restricted in the ability to pave more of our land in order to build more roads, but we should be allowed to find a solution that involves public transit, because public transit is going to make this region livable. Coquitlam has, we think, put forward a really strong case for a new station at Lincoln. And I've been public with this because we've been trying to get this, and I'm hoping that it'll be approved. Ultimately, the station would be funded out of the development revenue, the benefiting area kind of solution, where the land windfall around a station helps fund the construction of a station. If we had done that 20 years ago, when Evergreen Line was supposed to first be built, back before any of the high-rises in Coquitlam City Center were in, those high-rises, the high-rises, the land lift around there, would have been able to fund the entire line. And that's what we're looking at right now as we go to Surrey. How do you fund the next line out in Surrey, which will probably be at grade? You could fund it entirely with development revenues, because every time you build a station, the land around it triples in value, quadruples in value. Take just a little portion of that windfall, and everyone's happy. So the solutions are out there.
Okay, I guess some of the question has already been answered. My question is about the transit station on Lincoln Avenue. So the Coquitlam mayor could answer that question. The other mayors can add on their opinions. My question is, when we can expect to hear a decision about the station to be built or not to be built, and where we are standing right now about the funding for that station?
Should be any minute. We've put forward a strong case.
Oh, the bell rang. That's the bell.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
Okay, over to you, Mike.
Thank you all for coming. No. Did you put the 10-minute sign up?
And we put forward a strong case. We think we've earned the station, and I really expect that a decision will be forthcoming relatively quickly. As for the funding, it is essentially, the model would be akin to those development revenues. I can't actually talk too much about it until an announcement one way or the other is made. So, but the station has been predicated on the thought that the development revenues around the station can help fund the station. And we've been pretty upfront with that since the beginning of this process. And I think, I'm confident actually that we'll be able to move forward with it. And ultimately, that was one of the stations that was left off of the original plan. It said that's the anticipated station or the future station, and communities had to earn those stations, and we believe we've done it.